Hello, so this video is about the very first section of the park, what you see as soon as you leave the glass entrance, which I will talk about in another video. So the inspiration behind this is England, Scandinavia and France looped together. My initial inspiration for it was actually Frederiksborg Castle, which is in Denmark. So I'm just going to run through it and tell you all what exactly is going on in this section. And they are inspired by the blue gates in Royal Djurgården. I apologise for my pronunciation. The Royal Djurgården gates are in Stockholm, and they're these beautiful blue gates. I think they have deer's heads on top of them. And that was what I was going to have, something very similar. But sometimes when I'm drawing things, what I thought I was going to draw and what I actually draw becomes different, and this was the case here. So what we've actually got is a double set of gates with, I believe, clouds of some sort, and a lot of cast iron wiring with faces, so funny little angry faces. That was just purely an intuitive drawing that came to me. Once you get past the gates, you'll see this giant lake, and on the lake will be a game. So the lake itself is inspired by Canoe Lake in Portsmouth, which growing up was one of the places that I went to. If I didn't go away to another country, I'd go to Portsmouth. And what I loved about it is that you could fish for jellyfish and you could also ride swans. Swan pedalos, in fact. So this is kind of like a nostalgic, reminiscent lake, and you can also have the privilege of, while you're riding the pedalos, also going under sort of hoops and around bollards, as it were, as a form of a game. But it's not timed or anything like that. It's just up to you how you want to go about it. To the left of the gates and to the left of the lake, a series of shops. These shops will sell traditional Western European food. There'll also be a rock shop. So if you've ever had rock when you've been to the seaside, there'll be one of those. Further towards the back, there'll be a lion and wyvern ride. So a lion, everyone knows what a lion is, and a wyvern is like a dragon, but it's smaller and it has 2 feet rather than 4. And this is basically a magic mouse, but themed lion and wyvern. Lions and wyverns are very traditional English or Welsh symbols, and I felt like, that being English, I should have something in the park that represents that. But I also felt like it worked really well with the Magic Mouse theme and the idea of the carts chasing each other, and just kind of a fun introductory to the park as well. To the right of the lake, we've got what I'm calling the Seagull Ride, and that's inspired by my trip when I went to Porto and I saw seagulls flying in the air in circles, and that's called riding a thermal. So a thermal is what happens when the ground is quite damp, and then over the course of the day it heats up, and that causes all of that steam to rise, and the seagulls or birds use that as a way to keep them in rotation in the air, so they don't actually have to use their wings to fly. And it's quite a clever way of kind of moving, and just a free way of moving, free energy, as it were. And I thought that it would be great. So it kind of, I feel like the ride would be maybe like a Gerstlauer, a sky roller, or something similar, where you have a degree of individual movement, but you're still kind of stuck in a fixed rotation. To the far right of the gates, we'll also have a traditional English pub selling things like, chicken and leek pie. And there'll also be things like, so in the UK we have, the 90s era babies have an obsession with traditional school puddings particularly. So we'll have things like cake and custard and caramel tart. If you've never had that before, check that out. It's absolutely delicious. There will also be, to the right of the pub, a small, but I guess a huge grandfather clock, but a small Big Ben. So if you go to Victoria Station in London, there's a smaller scaled down version of Big Ben, but it's black, and it's incredibly beautiful. So we'll have something that's very similar to that, just because to me, there are so many things about London that make it nice and just such a great place to live. But for me, nothing beats the kind of small details that people add in and that you see every day, but you don't really think about. And it's just kind of paying my respects to that, as it were. So to the back of the park, there's a chateau. Originally, it was supposed to be a Frederiksborg castle kind of hybrid thing, but actually I was looking through a book on B&Bs in France just randomly, and I saw this, again, I can't pronounce it, Chateau de Mazul. It's in Quince in France, so south of France, and it's this gorgeous little building that has both circular and square towers, and for me that really stood out to me. I thought that was really beautiful, and so I've stretched it out just to make it a bigger space. And to the front of the castle, if you look at it on Google Maps, there's a little patch of green, so I've kept that in there as like a little picnic area or a separate area that people can sit outside when it's not too hot. So what we've got in the chateau is, on the surface of it, you can see that there's two illustrations either side. They, again, were kind of my intuitive drawings. One of them to the right is a king walking away from his throne, I don't know, and people having some sort of park lunch or maybe sitting by a pond, perhaps. To the centre of the castle, you'll see that there's stairs going up to two doors, and at the top there's like a cutout. Again, this was quite intuitive, but I thought it would be quite nice for people to see the interior of the building, which would be quite ornate and very traditional. On the inside, there is a game of sorts. So if you've ever watched sort of 90s kids TV, it's a kind of like a hidden object game. So you would take turns to go into a room, find an object, and get out within the required time frame. And I like these sorts of things because I feel like they're very tactile, and they're very fun, and they get everyone involved. They don't require too much skill, and so it makes it quite a nice way to go into an experience, as a starting point. And then it will be based on, your team versus, let's say, 6 other teams, and obviously there's no prize, but the prize is that you win, and that's good enough for most people. At the top of the castle, there will be something that I'm calling high tea. So afternoon tea, high tea, they're different things but similar. And when I went to, I think, where was it? It might have been Denmark. They had this Victorian section where they would showcase entire full-scale replicas of dinners that they would have, the kinds of Christmas dinner or seasonal dinners that they would eat. And in one of the rooms, they had this giant swan, and they would use that to serve food out of. So for me, each person who comes to the high tea will have that experience where they're served food out of a giant swan or a giant peacock, and then all of the cutlery and all of the crockery will be themed to that same style. And then obviously you'll have your traditional high tea food, such as, egg and crust sandwiches, biscuits, brownies, scones, not scones. I feel like that would be quite popular because people really love having English tea, English high tea, even English people love that. So that's section 1. I would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts on it. I'd like to say it's still a work in process. It's not. This is probably the only section of the park that was 98% figured out before I started to draw this, and it hasn't really changed tons from any earlier iterations, which I may show in later videos. So I'd like to hear your feedback, so let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you very much for listening.